My name is Vivian Hart. I'm 69, a retired public health nurse, and a widow of 15 years. I spent decades in other people's living rooms and hospital wards counting breaths, steadying hands. I didn't expect to use the same calm on my own life. Colin, my husband, went out one spring morning to prune the grapevine behind our brick row house on Arden Street. A neighbor found him by the trellis, gone between one heartbeat and the next. I kept the house until silence sounded like a second resident. When I sold it, my son Adrian called it practical. "You shouldn't be alone across town, Mum. Come closer." Closer, I learned, can cut both ways. I moved into their glass-bright apartment by the tram lines, Adrian, his wife Marina, and their daughter Noah. At first, there were cheerful arrangements, a drawer for my tea, a key fob, a shelf for photographs. I tried to be helpful without being in the way. Soon I cooked most nights. Laundry appeared near my door, a soft suggestion becoming a schedule. Invitations from church were handled. Marina told them I was resting before I knew I was tired. Noah was different. She had observant eyes and a grave kindness. After school, I poured her jasmine tea heavy with honey, and we built cities from cracker boxes. She called me Nana Viv. On a gray Tuesday, Adrian pushed his head into the kitchen with the airy cheer of someone late. "We've got errands. Can you hang with Noah?" Of course I could. Marina waved from the door without looking up from her call, and then it was just me, Noah, and the clock. She colored quietly, the rasp of crayon like rain. "Careful, Nana," she said at last, still drawing. "They said they're making plans without you." "What plans, love?" I asked, keeping my voice even. She shrugged the small, heavy shrug of children. "About your house money, and a place where helpers watch old ladies. Mum said it's easier if you sign before you forget. Dad said it's just paperwork." I smiled because she needed me to. "Thank you for telling me." That night, long after Noah slept, I passed the little office Adrian and Marina shared. The door wasn't shut, and neither were their voices. If she signs a durable power of attorney now, we can streamline everything, Marina said. Paper rustled. "We should move the investment account before the quarter closes." A printer started. I stood in the hall, invisible and awake. A photo of Colin laughing in our old garden caught the lamplight. He once told me I remembered too much. In the morning, I opened my red-spined notebook, the one meant for grocery lists, that had become a ledger of weathered truths. I wrote dates, phrases, the precise tilt of Marina's certainty. I logged into my bank account on the old laptop I kept tucked inside a knitting bag so it wouldn't be tidied away. The numbers were mostly right until they weren't small transfers to a joint platform I didn't recognize, a consultation fee to a firm with no memory of me, and a pre-authorization I hadn't made. I made tea and for once read the terms I used to skim authorization, co-signatory estate simplification. I closed the laptop and listened to the apartment pipes ticking, a tram bell 2 streets over. My hands were steady. Fury is noisy. Clarity is quiet. At noon, Marina suggested I skip book club. "You've seemed foggy lately," she said, all empathy and edges. "Don't overdo it." I nodded and went to my room. From the bottom drawer, I pulled a thick oak brown envelope I'd been feeding without admitting it. Bank statements, my original will, insurance copies, and notes on plain paper who said what, when, to whom they thought I wasn't listening. By late afternoon, the apartment smelled of lemon cleaner and rosemary chicken I'd set in the oven out of habit. Noah's drawing clung to the fridge, 4 figures holding hands in front of a high-windowed building. I was there too, off to the side, teacup in hand like a prop. Adrian and Marina returned with the ease of people carrying a conclusion. Over dinner, they sketched renovations I hadn't asked, to imagine knocking out a wall, a second sink upstairs, phrases like open flow and modernized sliding across the table. Their future used my present as scaffolding. When Noah went to brush her teeth, Adrian laid an envelope beside my plate with deliberate casualness. "Nothing urgent," he said. "Some forms the consultant wants you to review. We'll go through them this weekend." "I prefer to read in quiet," I said, and slid the envelope into the tea towel drawer. I didn't sleep. I brewed black tea and poured it into my dented steel flask, the one Colin used to take fishing when hot drinks were our luxury. I have never been the loudest person in any room, but I know how to keep someone breathing when everything else is trying to stop them, and that includes myself. Before dawn, I packed a bag, nothing dramatic, the red notebook, the envelope of papers, my passport, a phone charger, and Noah's last thank you note folded soft. I tucked the flask beside them. On the counter, I propped Noah's drawing against the fruit bowl where she would see it first. When I woke Noah for school, she blinked in that trusting way morning gives. "Are we going somewhere?" she whispered. "To the corner, Finch." I said the cafe 2 blocks down where they overtoast bagels and let you sit as long as you like. "Tell me about your spelling test. We'll be back before your parents remember they're late." She slipped her hand into mine. Her fingers were warm, mine were decided. The elevator hummed as if nothing in the building ever changed. But when the doors opened and we stepped inside, the light felt different. I didn't know everything yet, only that Closer had turned into a plan with my name printed small and other people's signatures waiting. There are days when you stop letting the current drag you and begin to steer. The cafe was a cover for now. I had an old number to dial from the back of a recipe book and a conversation that would require my best voice. By the time the kettle behind the counter began to shriek, I had already taken a pen from my bag and opened the red notebook to a clean page. Across the top in careful, unshaking letters, I wrote, "What I will keep." The corner finch smelled like burnt sesame and citrus cleaner, the sort of scent that tells you no one will hurry you along. I settled Noah at a corner table with a blueberry muffin the size of her fist and a pencil she insisted on carrying in her sleeve like a magician's wand. We played hangman while the city woke. Her first word was galaxy, which she spelled wrong and then laughed about, unbothered by imperfection in a way I envied. At 8:15 I walked her to school, the pavement shining with last night's drizzle. Outside the gate she squeezed my hand, then ran back to press a crumpled sticky note into my palm, a sketch of a tea mug with steam that turned into a cat. "For later," she said, and skipped toward the bell. I stood there for an extra beat after she disappeared, pretending to watch traffic so the teacher on duty wouldn't ask if I needed anything. I didn't. I needed to remember who I used to be before other people's definitions narrowed my edges. Back at the cafe, I took the red notebook from my bag and opened the recipe book I'd smuggled out of the apartment months ago, Colin's old flour-splattered volume. Taped to the inside back cover was a yellowed index card with a number written in his square patient hand, E. Brooks, 555-0198. Evelyn Brooks had helped him draft our wills, sort his pension, coax me through forms when grief clouded language. I had not dialed that number in over a decade. The call connected on the third ring. Brooks Law, a voice said, brisk, unhurried. "This is..." I'm not sure what to say first. I steadied my tone. "My name is Vivian Hart. I was a client's wife." Colin Hart. Years ago. A pause and then warmth slid into the voice like sunlight around a curtain. "Vivian, I remember. I'm Evelyn. Are you all right?" "I think so," I said. "But I'd like to talk before I'm not." She offered a time, 11 o'clock, and an address only a bus and 2 blocks away. I wrote both into the red notebook, underlined today twice, and finished Noah's muffin crumbs because it felt wrong to leave them. The law office occupied a second floor above a seamstress who specialized in wedding alterations. A satin dress glared at the street like a lighthouse. Inside, the reception smelled faintly of cardamom. Evelyn came out to greet me, herself smaller than I remembered, and sharper around the eyes as though time had sanded away everything unnecessary. We exchanged a hug that was not quite a hug and went into her office. Her desk was tidy in the ruthless way of people who work daily with chaos. She didn't ask for the story all at once. She poured tea and set a yellow legal pad between us. "Start where you like," she said. I started at the fridge, drawing. I told her about the apartment down by the tram lines, the drawer of tea becoming an unspoken roster of chores, church calls rerouted without my consent. I told her about the gray Tuesday, the envelope not urgent, the muffled conversation in the half-closed office, the terms that mislabel dependency as care. I slid over bank printouts and a list of authorizations I did not recognize. I said I may be wrong twice and stopped saying it when she raised a hand. "I believe you," she said simply. "Some knots you can feel loosen when someone says that." Evelyn read quickly, marking margins with tidy triangles. "Here's what we do," she said at last, tapping her pen once. "We close the doors they're building and open the ones you choose." She spoke in steps as if counting breaths for an anxious patient. "First, we file a notice that any pending application to appoint an agent on your behalf, financial or medical, has not been authorized by you. We deliver it to the registry, your bank, your primary care physician, and the notary service I suspect they plan to use." My stomach fluttered, fear, relief, both. "Can we do that today? We can draft the letters in an hour." She turned to a fresh page. "Second, we move your accounts. New bank, new numbers, 2-factor authentication to a device they can't touch. We freeze or close anything that could be jointly accessed. Do you have a cell phone in your own name?" "I do." I patted the bag. I keep it quiet so it doesn't get tidied. Her mouth twitched. "Good. Third, we speak about your estate plan. The will you and Colin drafted presumes a son who remains who you raised him to be." She looked up, not unkind. "We can't legislate a heart, but we can limit its reach. I recommend a revocable living trust." "For Noah," I said without thinking. "For Noah," she echoed. "You as the current trustee, a professional successor trustee, someone who will not be swayed by family storms. The assets go into the trust now, not later. Distribution to Noah at 25 with options to support health and education earlier, but nothing that roots through her parents. Clear clauses about coercion and undue influence. Paper walls aren't perfect, but they slow bad hands. And what about..." I hesitated, embarrassed by an old fear. "What if they say I'm confused, that I'm being manipulated?" Evelyn folded her hands. Fourth, we arrange an independent cognitive and capacity evaluation standard routine documented. We also take a statement from me and from my associate who will witness your decisions. You'll leave with a dated certificate that says in language, no judge will ignore Ms. Hart understands and makes these choices freely. I breathed out through my nose. Fury is noisy. Clarity is quiet. She pushed a pen toward me. We'll also create a letter of intent, your words to Noah, to be attached to the trust. Not a legal document exactly, a lighthouse. I wrote for a long time, not about betrayal, about tomato vines and the names of stars and the way Colin pretended not to like blackcurrant tea and always finished mine. About the kind of help that doesn't trade kindness for control. About the choice to protect her future until she can shape it herself. When my hand cramped, Evelyn slid over a rubber grip without looking up from her forms. By 1 o'clock, we had more paper than a small forest. I initialed, signed, paused, and signed again. The words, Revocable Living Trust, Hart Family, looked both heavier and lighter than I expected. Evelyn's associate, a broad-shouldered woman named Priya, with a calm that didn't crack, witnessed every signature. Priya made 2 jokes about fountain pens bleeding through on a hot day. I liked her immediately. We walked to a credit union 2 blocks away because private institutions can feel like fortresses, but credit unions still answer their phones. There, I moved the savings and the pension remainder. We opened a safe deposit box for originals and created a new email address I scribbled into the red notebook and nowhere else. Priya explained 2-factor authentication in patient detail as if I were new to it. I wasn't, but I let her instruct me. It made everyone in the room feel the right size. Back in Evelyn's office, I signed a final document, a standing instruction that any future requests to place my home investments or medical decisions under another's control must be verified through her firm with a live voice mine. A small lock in a big world, but a lock nonetheless. We were almost finished when Evelyn asked gently, Do you want the police involved for the financial irregularities? There are patterns here that could fit a report. I pictured Adrian as a boy kneeling on the kitchen floor to tie his shoe Colin, pretending the bow was a sailor's knot. I pictured the envelope by my plate, a kindness wrapped around a theft. Not yet, I said. I need them to believe I haven't noticed. For a little longer. That is your choice, she said, and I will be ready if your choice changes. When I stood to leave, she squeezed my hand with lawyerly brevity. Vivian, whatever story they try to tell, write yours first. Outside, the afternoon had broken open into a blue that made glass look merciful. I bought Noah a paperback from the shop by the bus stop, constellations on the cover, and a small tin of violet pastilles Colin always said tasted like soap. I kept them anyway. At 3, I took the bus back to the apartment. Marina texted, All good, Noah says you promised a treat. Please not too much sugar, we have piano. I replied with a thumbs up, a politeness that meant nothing, and tucked the tin deeper in my bag. The apartment felt aspirational again, plants too big for their pots, a coffee table book about Scandinavian storage. I went to my room and slid the truss binder slate gray with a discreet spine into the bottom of the knitting bag beneath a half-finished scarf. The red notebook I kept on the nightstand, disguised under a devotional I hadn't opened in years. I would like to tell you I felt triumphant. I did not. I felt like someone who has finally found the door in a dark room and is learning the weight of her own hand on the knob. At 4, Noah bounded in flush with playground air and held up a spelling test with a star. I spelled galaxy right this time, she whispered, thrilled by her own revision. I kissed her hair and let that be the first celebration of the day. Marina flitted between pantry and fridge, counting eggs aloud, a performance of hospitality. Dinner at home tonight, she announced. Adrian's thinking roast if you're up for it, Vivian. He misses your rosemary. I said nothing about the envelope in the tea towel drawer. Roast is nice, I replied. It reminds me of ordinary Sundays. Adrian arrived an hour later, loosened his tie with the solemnity of a man, removing armor, and kissed the top of Noah's head. He was charming with her in a way that always made me ache, as if the tenderness I recognized had been set down somewhere and he'd forgotten the route back. While the potatoes crackled, I labeled 3 manila folders and lined them inside my knitting bag. Notices filed, new accounts, trust summaries. It was a quiet ritual like setting out bandages and a stethoscope before a difficult night shift. The action calms the hands. We ate at 7. Noah told a story about a class caterpillar that had turned into a suspiciously lopsided butterfly. Adrian talked about optimizing the flow of the apartment and mentioned knocking down the wall between kitchen and dining, a note he played often. Marina interlaced sentences with phrases she liked to lift from articles: estate hygiene, succession clarity, future-proofing. I sipped water and said little, tasting each word the way you do a soup that may be too salty. After dishes, Noah yawned theatrically. Bed, Marina commanded with genial warmth. Nana Viv read the constellation book. I followed Noah to her room and lay beside her while she traced Orion with her forefinger on the glow-in-the-dark map. If we draw new lines, she asked, voice thick with sleep. Do the stars get feelings about it? I think they're relieved to be called what they are, I said. She slept. I stayed long enough to feel her breathing fall into that steady, beautiful pattern, familiar to every nurse who has watched someone cross from fretfulness into rest. Then I returned to the living room. Adrian and Marina sat on the sofa with twin mugs of chamomile, a show of civility. The envelope had reappeared on the coffee table as if it had walked there on purpose. We thought we could go through some paperwork, Adrian said with a smile just shy of convincing. No pressure. My heart did not race. I had already lifted the weight I needed to lift today. Tomorrow, I said, I'm tired. Marina's mouth pinched, then smoothed. Of course. We just want you comfortable. I nodded and rose. I'll make something special for dinner tomorrow, I added, voice mild. Let's sit down early, all of us. I looked at the clock and let the suggestion hang like a lantern. Adrian agreed too quickly. Marina hesitated and then echoed him. The plan clicked into place with the soft sound of a door that finally met its frame. In my room, I opened the red notebook and wrote the day's date across the top, then made a list in 2 neat columns. Close gaps permissions, who answers the phone. Open trust door voice. I added one more line not numbered. Invite Evelyn at 5:45, set an extra place. When the apartment fell quiet, I took the cat steam sticky note from my pocket and tucked it inside the slate gray binder. The drawing made me smile despite everything a small ordinary grace caught between legalese and caution. I turned off the lamp and lay down without the television, without the exhaustion of pretending confusion. In the dark, I could feel Colin, the way you feel a warm dent in a couch cushion after someone stands up. Not a ghost, a contour. This is how you keep someone breathing, I told the room. You do not wait to be asked. Sleep came like a tide that finally decided the shore had permission to rest. Morning would bring shopping lists and table settings and a roast rubbed with rosemary and salt, the way Adrian always liked back when preferences were not strategies. Evening would bring words arranged like scaffolding and documents arranged like weatherproofing and a gentle, unshakable refusal. Between those 2 hours, I would move through the apartment as if it were still mine in all the ways that count not in deeds or accounts, but in the discipline of choosing what I will keep. In the red notebook, under the list, I wrote a single sentence so plain it looked almost like a grocery item. I started the roast at 3 garlic bruised with the flat of a knife. Rosemary needles stripped and scattered salt coarse enough to sound like rain against the pan. Preparing a meal taught my hands to be deliberate. It slows the mind down to a pace that tells the heart breathe. I set the table as if it were any other weeknight. White plates, a linen runner, the chipped gravy boat Colin had found at a flea market and declared nobly lopsided. Beside the water glasses, I placed a card Noah had made at school that read family dinner in letters that wandered uphill. There were 4 settings and one more at the end, quiet, neutral, expectant. At 5:45, a knock sounded 3 even taps. I wiped my palms and opened the door to Evelyn Brooks, who wore slate slacks and a raincoat the color of penciled margins. She carried nothing but a folio and the kind of composed face people trust in emergency rooms. Right on time, I said. Lawyers live between clocks, she answered, a smile easing her features. And I brought my appetite. Noah met us in the hall, hair escaping her braid. Are you the guest? She asked, pleased by the concept. I am, Evelyn said, but only if I'm allowed to try your Nana's roast. Everyone tries Nana's roast, Noah declared, and sprinted ahead to announce the guest seat had been claimed. Adrian arrived minutes later, tie loosened, charm cued. He noticed Evelyn immediately, and the micro muscles in his jaw tightened before his smile expanded to cover it. We have company, he said, the cadence carefully light. An old friend, I replied. Evelyn knew your father's forms better than he did. Marina, already assembling a salad with the zeal of a host, drifted forward with a curated warmth. Lovely to have you, she said. Do you work in finance? In a sense, Evelyn said, hanging her raincoat neatly. I work where finance meets promises. We ate, or rather, we performed the motions of eating while other appetites waited their turn. Noah told us the class caterpillar had graduated into a moth with shredded wings. Adrian explained again how the wall between the kitchen and dining room obstructed flow. Marina contributed terms like legacy mapping and aging in place, as if they were herbs to be shaken over conversation. I answered in teaspoons, moths still fly. Flow isn't only space. Aging in place requires consent. When plates were cleared and Noah was upstairs brushing her teeth with a thrum that made the pipes sing, I set an apple tart on the table, thin sliced fruit fanned like a distant galaxy, and laid very gently the slate gray binder beside it. The room shifted the way a ship adjusts to a change in ballast. Adrian sat straighter. Marina's hand hovered above a fork that she decided not to pick up. We'll do dishes in a moment, I said. First, there are things you should hear while we're all rested. Evelyn folded her hands. She didn't reach for the binder. She didn't need to. Her very stillness announced that paper would speak soon enough. Adrian attempted a breezy laugh that snagged on a rough edge. If this is about the envelope, Mum, we were going to go through it with you tonight. No pressure, just clarity. Clarity is good, I said, and opened the binder to the first tab. The page on top bore my name and today's date letters crisp enough to convince even a skeptic that paper has posture. Notice of non-authorization. It read in plain language, followed by a sentence Evelyn had drafted with a scalpel. Any application to appoint an agent or representative for financial or medical decisions on behalf of Vivian Hart has not been made or consented to by Ms. Hart and is hereby expressly declined. Beneath it was a list of places the notice had already traveled: registry, bank, clinic, notary. Marina's politeness hardened by a degree. You've been busy, she said. I've been thorough, I answered, turning to the second tab. My accounts have moved. New numbers, new security. There are no joint platforms to manage on my behalf because there is no behalf. Adrian blinked, then smiled the way people do when they mishear and decide. A nicer version must be true. Mum, we never meant to. This is preventative, not punitive. Preventative is sunscreen, Evelyn said mildly. This was preparatory in a different direction. She slid a single sheet across the table. And just so we hold the same map, attempting to secure control over an elder's finances without consent has a legal name in this jurisdiction. I'd rather keep the evening gentle so we won't use it. But it exists. Adrian's face flushed a tide he couldn't command. We were protecting her. Protection consults, I said. Control informs. Marina found her voice again. Vivian, honey, future-proofing isn't control. We were thinking big picture, avoiding probate, streamlining decisions, ensuring no one can take advantage of you once, later. Evelyn's eyes stayed kind, which made the next sentence land without a thud. You can future-proof a roof, she said. You cannot future-proof a person. Persons get to decide. I turned to the third tab and let the page breathe between us. The Hart Family Trust revocable, it announced, my signature precise at the bottom. This holds the house, the savings, the remnants of a pension, I said. I am the current trustee. When I'm gone, a professional trustee will guard the assets until Noah is 25. There are pages about health and education, but nothing funnels through parents. Not because I am cruel, because I am awake. Marina's lips parted around a word that didn't arrive. Adrian looked at the tart as if it might offer an exit. Should one of you attempt to interfere, Evelyn added, tapping the margin with her pen, the trust triggers an automatic review and notifies my office, which as of this afternoon has recorded your prior attempts to initiate transfers without Ms. Hart's consent. Again, I prefer gentle. But documentation does what voices cannot. Noah's light step creaked the stair. I stood as she appeared in the doorway, cheeks pink from too much toothpaste. The air thinned into silence that children can sense without vocabulary. Sweet pea, I said. Could you pick a book and tuck in? I'll be up in 6 minutes. Choose one with stars. Or cats, she said, attempting gravity. Cats that look like steam. Especially those, I said. She vanished and the house exhaled. Adrian reached into his jacket and produced the envelope he'd placed before me the night prior, a man trying to rewind tape that had already been recorded over. These are just options, he said, voice dropping its playfulness. Durable power of attorney deed language. Nothing binding. We wanted to show good faith. Good faith would have been a conversation, I said. Good faith would have used my name without assuming my signature. His hand trembled. He did not put the envelope down. I am not pressing charges, I continued, and the room knit itself abruptly around those 4 words. Not tonight, not yet. I am, however, changing the rules of my participation. There will be no more requests for passwords, no more consultations made without me, no more envelopes. If you email the consultant again, you will copy me. If anyone speaks of my capacity as if it were a rumor, I will schedule an evaluation on my own terms and file it where it will outlive gossip. Marina flinched. Vivian, no one said. You did, I said gently, not cruelly, efficiently. Evelyn has the notes. Evelyn didn't move, which somehow made her presence louder. You're both intelligent people, she said evenly. You can use that intelligence now to do one of 2 things, escalate or recalibrate. If you escalate, if you attempt to coerce, cajole, or misrepresent my office, we'll name what has occurred and act accordingly. If you recalibrate, you'll find this arrangement leaves you one vast privilege to be loved without access. Adrian stared at the envelope, then slid it back into his jacket, as though the paper had acquired heat. What happens now? He asked, small in a way I recognized from the days he fell off bicycles. Now, I said. We wash dishes. We put Noah to bed. In the morning, I'll meet an agent about a small apartment not far from her school. Something with a balcony and stubborn windows. I will finish what's mine here this week. You will not stop me. You will not help me. You will practice leaving me unsupervised. Marina's eyes shimmered. To her credit, she did not reach for my hand. We didn't mean to make you feel, I know I said and meant it, but intent does not reset outcomes. Tomorrow, a locksmith will change 2 cylinders. You'll be given keys that open what is yours, not mine. Adrian's shoulders sagged. For a heartbeat, I saw a boy who had wanted to be good so badly, He mistook acquisition for love. Do you still, he began, failing to finish the sentence. Love you, I supplied. Of course. That is why I'm doing the hard version of kindness. We sat there with that 3 adults and a binder and a tart we were no longer hungry for. Evelyn capped her pen in efficient, closing a book. I'll leave you to your evening, she said, standing. Vivian, I'll call at 10. Adrian, Marina, if you need to clarify any of what you've heard, my card is under your water glass. Marina startled, then lifted her glass to reveal the white rectangle she hadn't noticed slide into place. At the door, Evelyn squeezed my forearm. You did this with grace, she said quietly. Grace is cheaper than rage, I said, and it lasts longer. After she left, the apartment felt very tall. We stacked plates. We moved around each other like dancers who'd learned conflicting choreography. In Noah's room, I read about constellations that have been renamed and still don't fall. She fell asleep mid-sentence, fingers curled around the cat steam sticky note I had tucked in the book as a marker. Downstairs, Adrian stood at the window as if the glass were a question. Marina wiped the counter in careful arcs until the surface shone like denial. I packed the tart under cling film and wrote for breakfast on a scrap of paper an ordinary kindness to keep the evening from cracking. Before bed, I opened the red notebook and recorded the hour, the names, the words I wanted to keep. Exact recalibrate without access hard version of kindness. Underneath, I added a list titled, What the House Heard and Wrote Laughter at 7 Legally Significant Silence at 7:20 Doors Becoming Nouns instead of verbs. I slid the notebook beneath the devotion and turned off my lamp. Somewhere above me, a tram bell chimed a sound I had learned to love because it meant the city kept moving whether or not we did. In the dark, the world felt neither safe nor dangerous. It felt accurate. Tomorrow would be keys and boxes and a balcony with the right stubborn windows. It would also be emails from consultants who discovered their numbers no longer connected what they thought they did, and a locksmith marking 2 circles of brass with a new grammar for entry. Tomorrow would be the first morning I set an extra plate only for those who know how to ask. And in that space between a found door and a chosen threshold, something inside me settled, not triumphant, simply true. The locksmith came at 9, a woman with a van, full of tidy drawers and a name tag that read Wren. She worked in quiet clicks, swapping cylinders on the small place I'd signed. For 2 days earlier, 4th floor South Light, a modest balcony with a railing that minded its own business. While she worked, I set the kettle on and opened the balcony door so the morning could stop pressing its face against the glass and simply come in. Test it, Wren said at last, stepping back. The key turned with the satisfying catch of something made precise after being careless too long. I thanked her and tucked 2 spares into the kitchen drawer beside a rubber band and a pencil stub. There's a holiness to kitchen drawers when you start over. Nothing in them is accidental. Boxes came by noon, books that know where they belong before we do. 2 plates of saucepan, the dented steel flask, the red notebook, and the binder slate gray, waiting on the counter like a patient guest. I left my suitcase by the sofa, draped my coat over the arm, and stood. Just stood long enough to feel the apartment shape itself around my breathing. At 3, Evelyn called. How's the air? Friendly, I said, which was the right word. She went down a short list. The notices had posted. The credit union confirmations had arrived. Her associate Priya had filed a brief letter of representation with the notary, whose name appeared on Marina's underlined calendar square. If anyone tries to move faster than consent, Evelyn said the floor will not hold. And the trust, I asked. It's a lighthouse, she replied. And in case you're asked, it covers your accounts and any real property you might acquire later. Nothing that belongs to other people. Paper that imagines kitchens is still paper. It does not demolish walls. I smiled toward the balcony. You were listening at dinner. I practiced, she said. After we hung up, I walked to the little market on Birch Street. I bought curtains the color of leaves that haven't decided whether to fall, a tin of blackcurrant tea Colin would have teased, and a tiny basil plant that looked like it needed someone to say, go on, try. Back home, I boiled water and wrote the new address at the top of a clean page in the red notebook. Under it, I listed a handful of things I wanted the room to learn about me. Tea at 4 Shoes by the door notebook lives on the table. Silence is welcome music on Saturdays. That evening, Noah knocked exactly at 6 with her backpack and a grin that made my hands forget they were tired. Mum said I can stay till 8, she announced, scooting inside like a coin under a door. He's figuring things out. There was a hesitation after Dad I didn't chase. We made grilled cheese because it is ceremonial and democratic. She put the cat steam sticky note on my new fridge and declared the kitchen properly inaugurated. After dinner, we took the Constellation book out to the balcony. The city hummed in a way that was not intruding, just insisting on its existence. Noah pointed at the first shy stars and tried to rename them. If we call this one Nana, she said, then it has to show up every night. I don't want any star working overtime on my account, I told her. Let Nana be a warm lamp that you can switch off. She leaned her head against my shoulder. Okay. Then this one can be lamp that knows when to rest. When 8 came, Marina texted that she was downstairs. Noah hugged me with the full-wrapped honesty of children who aren't rationing affection yet. Saturday, she asked. Saturday, I promised. After the door closed, the apartment settled into a shape that looked a little like solitude and a little like relief. I washed the 2 plates, dried them, and lined them on the rack as if balancing equations. Then I sat at the table with the red notebook and wrote, "I will not mistake peace for emptiness again." The next morning, I kept a promise to myself. I called Dr. Chang, an internist who used to trade recipes with me when she rounded the ward. She referred me to a neurologist and a psychologist who fit us in. Within a week, no flagged urgency, no emergency, just appointments right-sized to their names. I arrived with my hair done and an index card in my pocket that read, "You are allowed to be thorough." The tests were not dramatic. Remember 5 words, name, the month, count backward by 7s. I negotiated 5s. More interesting were the questions that asked what I understood about my own choices. "Why did you set up a trust?" the psychologist asked. "Because a roof and a future both need anchors," I said. Anchors aren't accusations. At the end of the week, Dr. Chang called with a voice that had the kind of smile you hear. "Report is clean, Vivian. No impairment. I'm sending you the certificate for your records, and to Ms. Brooks, of course." I slid the letter into the binder under a tab labeled "For anyone who forgets I remember." Then I made tea and stood by the window long enough to watch a gull argue with a bus stop sign and win. 2 days later, a beige envelope found my new mail slot. The return address belonged to a consultant who preferred crisp fonts and euphemisms. The letter asked that I reconsider allowing a temporary delegation of decision-making. It slipped in the word "decline" as a forecast, not a weather report. I placed it beside the basin, washed my hands, dried them fully, and called Evelyn. "Would you like the gentle reply or the efficient one?" she asked. "Both," I said. She faxed something elegant. The consultant withdrew with apologies for any overreach and artful sentence for a clumsy step. Noah's visits became a rhythm the apartment liked. Tuesdays for hot chocolate and spelling lists, Saturdays for pancakes and watercolor paints that stained our fingers a brave blue. She told me her class caterpillar had finally collected its wings properly and glided around the classroom like a creased ribbon. Maybe it just needed a teacher to stop staring, she said. Most living things do better without an audience, I agreed. Adrian did not come. Marina sent courteous texts that sounded like someone practicing for a role. On a windy Thursday, a message arrived from a number I hadn't saved. "Mum, may I stop by 10 minutes?" The politeness was correct enough that I said yes. He stood at my doors like a boy who'd taken a wrong bus. He noticed the basil, the curtains, the binder. He did not step past the threshold until I said, "Come in." We did not perform tea. We sat at the table like 2 people at the edge of a map. He began with sentences that had practiced openings and unpracticed middles. "I'm sorry for all of it," he said, and his voice landed on the table with an honest thud. I kept telling myself I was being responsible, and then I started to believe responsibility looks like possession. "That's a seductive definition," I said. "It excuses forgetting to ask." He nodded, then looked toward the door as if leaving were a skill he needed to rehearse. "I lost a client," he admitted, not for pity, for context. "But I didn't come to ask for anything." "I'm relieved to hear what you didn't come for," I said, not unkindly. Silence made room for something that wasn't defense. He took a breath. "Do you still love me?" "I do," I said. "But love is an access. You are welcome on this side of that sentence if you can stand there." His eyes watered and did not spill. "I can try." "Good," I said. Trying is a real verb. When he left, he didn't reach for the binder. He touched the basil with one fingertip and said inexplicably, "Go on." After he closed the door, I wrote in the red notebook, "Forgiveness is not furniture. It doesn't mean you get to move back in." Life developed habits that fit. I joined a watercolor class at the senior center because a flyer in the laundromat promised beginner skies. The instructor, a woman named Marta, told us clouds are about edges, not centers. I painted a sky that looked a little like a confession and a little like weather. Noah pronounced it accurate. I took a morning shift at the library's reading circle on Thursdays the hour for people who prefer one chapter and long pauses. A man named Russell read poems out loud like someone taping a broken thing back together. We clapped softly, a sound you can feel more than hear. On a quiet afternoon, I met Evelyn for coffee and slid an envelope across the table, a different kind, a starter fund. For a small grant, I said, for nursing students who think they can't afford to be kind and still pay rent. Evelyn read the note I tucked inside the Colin Hart Quiet Hands Scholarship. She exhaled. "You're certain?" "Yes," I said. "It's not grand, it's precise." Paperwork followed in the weeks after tiny targeted kindness disguised as forms. I told no one but Noah, who asked if the scholarship could require good bedside stories. "It can encourage them," I said. "Requirements make stories hide." Autumn leaned into winter. I bought a second blanket and taught the kettle to sing on lower heat. The basil decided the windowsill was a rumor and went to seed. I kept the little brown stems for their diligence. On a Sunday, Noah brought me a school essay folded into fourths. My favorite place, it read, and the first line was this: "My favorite place is where the lamp knows when to rest." I tacked it to the wall beside the cat steam note because some galleries are better in kitchens. In December, another beige envelope tried to look official and failed. This one carried only a sentence from Adrian: "I understand and I'm learning." He didn't ask for an answer, so I gave him the courtesy of none. On the longest night of the year, the city glittered in a way that wasn't boastful, just workmanlike. I brewed blackcurrant tea and carried a mug to the balcony. The air bit and backed off undecided. Above the tram wires, a stubborn few stars showed up anyway. I thought of what we had kept and what we had given away, of Colin's laugh threaded through drawers of ordinary things, of Evelyn's steady pen, of Wren's key, of Noah renaming stars without asking permission from the sky, of Adrian trying which is a verb worth writing down even when it doesn't lead anywhere we can see yet. Inside the binder sat on the shelf beside the constellation book, not a threat, a tool. The red notebook lay open to a page with 2 lists, closed and opened. Under opened, I added a line: "Windows that argue with wind, but kindly." When I turned off the lamp, the apartment did not feel small. It felt exact. I lay down and listened to the building settle a chorus of minor creaks saying, "We have a weight, we have made room." I thought of the first night I moved in and how I stood just to hear myself breathe. I thought of Noah promising Saturday as if the week were a bridge she could build with a word. There is a kind of victory that never strides, never plants flags, never asks history to stare at it. It lays table settings for the people who've earned them. It files forms that make room for tenderness. It keeps the kettle clean. It remembers 5 words and counts backward by 5s if 7s are rude. It does not shout windows into being. It opens them. I woke before dawn to the tram bell in the city practicing its day. I made tea and watched the sky stain pale. On the fridge, the cat steam note and the essay breathed quietly, paper doing what voices cannot staying. I am 69 and I have turned the key to a door I chose. I am a nurse retired only from wages. I am a mother who loves without providing access codes. I am a grandmother whose lamp knows when to rest. The kettle sighed and the room, my room, held the sound without effort. I lifted the mug warm enough to call the hands back to themselves and began another ordinary morning, the kind of ending you can live in. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story. I'll see you next time as we continue exploring more journeys and lessons together.